My encounter happened to me late June, about 5 years ago. At this time, I was traveling north of Lexington, Michigan, which, for those that don't know, is full of heavily, thick forested area and lots of rural farmland all around. And of course, living here for the past 5 or 6 years before that, you hear tales sometimes about a strange creature known as the Dogman. Now at the time, or should I say before that, I didn't really buy into mysterious creatures that you could never see, kind of like Bigfoot. Animals that were supposedly elusive to the rest of society. And living in this area for the past 5 to 6 years, of course I had heard of the Dogman, especially being neighboring states to Wisconsin, where they had this supposed beast of Bray Road, but again, at the time, I didn't buy a single ounce of it. But, back on that day in late June, my opinion as a skeptic was forever changed. Like I said, I was driving north on the M25 north of Lexington. This was in the evening time, probably around 6 p.m., where everything is still rather bright. If you're heading northbound, you'll eventually get to a turnoff to your left, known as Helena Road. As soon as I turned onto this road, that's when I saw this creature. Directly to my left, it looked to be some farming equipment and some grain silos. Directly behind that was a thick cluster of trees and forest. And then, next to that and all around that was just empty farmland. I'm not sure if it was tilled or ready to be tilled. Either way, my eye caught initial movement, and when I looked, I see this massive creature walking from the empty field behind the trees. I got a good look at it, and there's no mistaking what I saw. This thing looked like an 8-foot-tall bodybuilder, and had a very German Shepherd-like looking head. I remember its arms kind of swaying back and forth. It almost kind of reminded me of a gorilla, except again, it had a massive bodybuilder body, was 8 feet tall, and a German Shepherd-like head. I have to repeat the details to myself sometimes because, frankly, I have a hard time believing it. Once this creature disappeared behind the trees, I still stayed slowed down, just in case it decided it would reappear, but it never did. For the next few moments after, I just felt in total shock, like one of those moments where you think to yourself, did I really just see that? The logical side of your brain will try to run through every scenario possible to give you a rational explanation, just so you know you're not insane. There is nothing in the wilderness that can resemble what I saw that day. It was clear weather too, not a cloud in the sky, and of course there were no other cars anywhere else around. M25 had a few other cars going up and down it, so traffic was minimal. There are houses that live directly off that road, so that's to be expected. But once you get a little further up north, traffic seems to die off a lot more. And Helena Road, for example, is kind of in the middle of nowhere. But as far as the sighting goes, it's something that has honestly just stayed with me for all this time. Even 5 years now, I still can't stop thinking about it. I kinda got a little crazy afterwards and spent all my time trying to see what I can find that would point me in the right direction. That's when I just had to swallow my pride and realize that there are things that are out there that we don't know about. Based off all the accounts I've ever heard, I do believe that what I saw was a Dogman, and then I do believe that they do exist. I can't be too sure about other states and other areas, but I know they're up here in Michigan, and from what I saw that day, they look like a creature that you don't want to mess with or piss off accidentally. This creature looked mean, but unlike some people, it has not stopped my willingness to go out into the forest and hike and adventure. I still do go on hikes, I still travel into the woods, I still do lots of normal everyday activities outside. My mindset on the whole thing is just like, look, I know they're there now, I can't deny that, even though the skeptical side of me wants to. I just have to respect that they're there and leave them alone. And in turn, I have to hope that they'll leave me alone too. If you're interested, I can give you the exact location that I saw this creature at. It took me a little while, but I researched on Google Maps and found the exact spot in which I saw it. If you decide to read this to your audience, well, your audience can check this with me too. Go check out 9944 Helena Road, Harbor Beach, Michigan. It will take you to the start of a turnoff, and to your left is those grain silos I was talking about, and that patch of trees, and all around you is basically just tilled farmland. The creature I saw was walking in that field, and for about 4 or so seconds, then walked behind that patch of trees and was gone. As you can see from the environment, there is nothing around there that you can mistake as a Dogman. It stuck out like a sore thumb, and had I not been driving by, this thing would have stayed fully incognito, and nobody would have ever saw it. When I think back and think about creatures like Bigfoot and Dogman, and how they're supposed to be so elusive and nobody ever sees them, well, this thing was sure taking a risk just walking out into the open like that. Anybody else driving down that road at the same time I did would have had a clear shot of this same creature. If there's anything to be taken away from my own story and personal encounter, is that you can never really be too sure. Yeah, it's okay to be skeptical of things, but don't be too hard-headed. Keep an open mind, because when the truth reveals itself, it could sometimes be a little more shocking than you'd like it to be. I'm not telling people to go out there and believe that Dogman exists. I'm just saying, keep an open mind. You never know what might happen in your life. Back in 2007, I went through a brief period of being homeless. Brief being around 8 to 9 months. I spent a lot of time hitchhiking, couch surfing, and just generally moving around from area to area. I want to say it was around September, because it was still hot out and fall hadn't quite set in. I had a very good friend of mine who allowed me to stay on his couch for about 3 weeks. This is before things went haywire, and we ended up in a drunken brawl and nearly had the cops call on us, and I had to leave. But that's a story I don't want to get into, because before I ended up on that friend's couch, I spent some time being homeless and down at the railroad tracks. The town I'm talking about is Kelso, Washington, a rather small but broken down town, filled with a lot of poverty and drugs and crime. There's a big river that runs between Kelso and Longview, and it kind of borders the two towns. Longview is more the commercial, uppity area, even though it has its fair of slums too. But Kelso really doesn't have anything. It's one of those older towns that used to be a logging community, but after the logging got shut down, things just took a turn for the worst. More and more poverty grew, drug use, and the cycle just rinsed and repeated over and over generations. It's a very sketchy place to be at night, and so that's why I spent a lot of my time right near the river, right by the train tracks. Not that this area was necessarily any better, but I felt I would at least be left alone. But even here, I had a nightmarish experience that kept me from ever going back. About right after this incident is when I ended up crashing out on my friend's couch for 3 weeks, which we then ended up fighting and I moved out of state again. I'm not here to BS you or to make up stories. This is what happened to me during my stint of being homeless. I've had some pretty bad run-ins with other people, bad people at that. I had been held at gunpoint and threatened with a knife at some point. I tried to stay as drunk and high as I could, just to numb out from the pain of not being wanted, of having nowhere to go. But this night that I had this experience, I had no drugs in my system, no alcohol, because at the time, I had no friends here. I didn't know anybody in this town, other than my friend, whom at this time didn't know I was here yet. Alright, enough backstory. During the first 3 to 4 nights here, I tried to stay up all night long and wander around the train tracks, because I felt if I kept myself up, I would avoid being mugged or robbed. This is the night that I believe I saw a werewolf. And maybe not a werewolf in a traditional sense where somebody turns under a full moon, but whatever animal, creature, whatever you want to call it I was looking at, resembled that out of a Hollywood movie. I was walking along the train tracks, northbound, and I heard some growling off to my left in the trees. I turned my head to see, and my eyes are met with another pair of eyes. Red eyes to be exact. But not cheesy glowing eyes like you would see from a monster movie. These were eyes that emitted light, much in the same way if you were to shine a light in a cat's eyes. It's that reflective gland they have. I don't know what they call it since I'm not a scientist, but it was that same kind of light emission. It immediately creeped me out, because, well, there's no light shining anywhere. So how this thing's eyes were emitting light like that, well, it was beyond me. This thing steps out underneath the streetlight. This creature reminded me of The Fly. You know, the movie with Jeff Goldblum in it. It looked like somebody mixed a human with a Doberman Pinscher. This thing looked all sorts of nasty. Humongous teeth like a lion. And when I say this is like a Hollywood movie prop come to life, I'm not kidding. It moved and looked and breathed far too real to be somebody in a costume or some sort of prop. The second that it showed itself, I took off running in the opposite direction. and I never turned around once to see if it was going to follow me. All I can remember is the thoughts entering my head of what kind of freaking animals live out here, man. The only thing that I knew about the area where this thing came out of was that homeless people would sometimes go down into that little forested area, have sex, shoot up, you know. I had seen cops go down there a couple times, usually to bust people doing heroin, but other than that, I kind of stayed out of there, in fear of getting mugged. That little area was also right next to the large river. I was so scared that I actually ended up running all the way to the south side of town, which is basically Crackheadville. I didn't care though. I'd rather be around a bunch of addicts and gangbangers than I would be that thing, whatever it is I saw, that, by the way, didn't end up chasing me. I don't know if some portal to hell opened up and this thing stepped out, or what. But hey, that's my experience in Kelso, Washington. As far as my adventures being homeless, well, that ended months later when I ended up finally settling down in Arizona, of all places. Fast forward 13 years later to now, I'm married, have a kid, I'm settled down, life is good. As far as what I saw that night, well, I still don't have an explanation for it. I just consider it some nasty creature that, for whatever reason, decided to show itself to me. Normally, I'm not a believer in what I'd call fictitious fairy tales like werewolves, vampires, and such. But I will acknowledge when I find proof of the existence of unknown animals that I didn't previously believe in. I've spent a lot of my time in the Sierra Nevada mountain range, exploring and looking for caves to dive into. I've camped out there many times. I've heard all sorts of wild, hairy tales. Things that will make your skin crawl. I, too, have found evidence to believe that there might be a predator at large that's far more potent than your typical mountain lion or black bear. I've come to find evidence of what I would best support the hypothesis that there is indeed a large alpha predator, more likely a wolf, that dominates much of the range on this mountain. I've heard stories where people talk about seeing bright lights, or even Bigfoot. I can't confirm nor deny any of that. I myself have had zero experiences with all of that. What I can confirm is the things that I know I have found that I cannot explain, and evidence that would point to a large, upright walking predatory wolf. The first major player in the evidence that I've mustered is finding large canid prints in multiple spots on my trek. There's one major component to these tracks, and it's that they don't adhere to your standard wolf-sized tracks. Your standard wolf track, on average, is around 4 inches in width and height. These that I've found are easily doubled, if not a little larger than double, and the indent is very visibly noticeable. This leans toward the fact that whatever large canine made this is not only larger, but much heavier due to a deeper indent into the soil. Here's where things get even hairier. They don't follow your typical quadrupedal pattern that a dog or a wolf would follow. They are bipedal by the pattern, following a 2-step pattern with a 4 to 5 foot stride. Massive strides. Does this support that there is some sort of large upright walking wolf around these parts? I'm not sure myself, although the evidence I've found seems to strongly show support of that for my findings. The real kicker to it all is I have found 4 to 5 sets in total of these same large canid bipedal style footprints throughout my time out here, all in varying locations and different spots. I struggle with the concept because I believe that if a wolf was to walk bipedally, it would walk like a bear, in the sense where they only walk for a short distance. But the longest stretch of tracks I found went on for well over 15 feet. All of these tracks were much in the same with indentation into the dirt, size, stride, and stepping pattern. It's possible that there could be a large pack of wolves out there that have grown to an abnormal size, learning to walk bipedally for short distances at a time. I have never found sets of tracks where it's more than just one. These are all just singular wolves that I've found on my time out. That is just one, what I like to call set of evidence, if you will. Now, I'm not saying what I'm about to tell you is necessarily evidence leaning towards my hypothesis. but it makes you wonder what's going on. What's killing these animals in the way they're being killed? I have discovered multiple deer and 2 black bears on account, dead. To dive into details a little more, I'm going to discuss with you the black bear deaths. Black bears do inhabit these mountain ranges, and although I don't see them as much, I do know they are here. I respect their space and that this is their home. To my knowledge and understanding, black bears don't have any predators that are above them. They don't have to worry about being killed due to them being omnivores, and their size and stature alone is enough to ward away mountain lions, for example. I'm sure a mountain lion and a bear have gotten into it before in nature, but I wouldn't put it past me. But I don't believe that is how these 2 black bear that I found were killed. I had come to almost a small valley where there's more tree coverage and lots of rock. Great as a protective enclosure with a small little cavern-like den. I had stumbled upon an actual black bear den. If I hadn't traveled down a 50 feet steep rocky incline of this hill into this little pocket of an area, I wouldn't have found what I did. Outside this small bear den, I know it was because I did check out the den after finding these bears, I discovered the cadavers of what looked to be 2 deceased black bears. The manner in which these black bears were killed was gruesome, to say the least. Both bears were within 10 feet of each other, killed by an unknown and unforeseen predator. The larger black bear, what I believe to be a male, but I didn't check, only judging by its size, had its head completely torn off its body. There was no head to be found anywhere around the area or visible vicinity that I was in. All along its body was large, deep gashes that looked to come from claws of great size. It was a bloody mess. Although the blood was coagulated, you could tell whatever happened that this bear suffered severe damage. The other bear, which lay no more than 10 feet away from the other bear, appeared to be smaller in size and frame. My guess was a female. As with the first, I didn't think in the moment to check the genitalia. The similarities and damage to this were mainly the deep gash wounds all over its body. It made me think of grizzly bear gashes, how they're so long and run so deep. These bears' body were shredded. The claw pattern wasn't even that of a bear though. It was different. If we're being honest, the flesh was far too mangled to get an accurate look as to what any claw pattern was exactly. The difference between the 2 bear is that this one was smaller, had its entire throat torn out. There was a lot of dried blood around it. Both of these bears had just died within the last day, judging by the freshness of the kill, so they were still rather fresh. Had I not wandered down into this area, I wouldn't have caught this grisly scene. Sorry about the pun. I just wanted to shed some light into a bleak scenario. The smell of decay hadn't even hit me until I wandered into here. The tree coverage and enclosure was so thick with rocks, it was almost encasing this area loosely, if that makes sense. I can see why it made for the perfect den spot. Anyhow, after spending maybe a few moments observing these dead bear and looking for any clues, I found bits of long, stringy black hair. This hair did not belong to the bears, but something else. I found it in small clumps and random sizes around the general radius of, I'd say 20 feet around us if I had to guess. The dirt beneath our feet was disturbed. I could see there were tracks of both bear and another animal, but I couldn't make out anything distinct. There had been too much ruffled dirt. It was clear there was some sort of fight, a struggle, and some form of mountain predator tore these bears to shreds, ripped off the head of one, and tore the throat out of another. Last I checked, mountain lions don't kill like this, especially not 2 black bears. Their claw size also wasn't capable of making the gashes that I saw. These were huge. The entire scene of this upset me so much, I had to get out of there, and fast. I figured whatever did this to these bears was still close enough to this area. So, I'm left with the question, what does that to a black bear? I always thought black bears were pretty much never challenged by other animals. I guess I'm wrong. Then I think about large canid tracks that I've seen over the years, and I can't help but put two and two together. I have never seen anything like the black bear seen since then or before. I'm not sure if those tracks have anything to do with what killed those bear, but I speculate it might. If the tracks I found really do belong to some unknown upright walking canid that lives out there, you're talking about a several 100-pound canid predator. Wolves themselves are large, so something more than double its size and bipedal. Now that's scary. Who knows what kind of damage, if exists, this animal could truly be capable of. The last and only other out-of-place findings I've really had have been deer. I found deer dead in all various ways of being killed. Just in the mountains, of course, which is the context here, where I primarily spend much of my time. I've seen them with their throats torn out and mangled, which could easily be explained by the current standard predators in the area. Then there are the ones that I find are stranger than fiction. Two ways, actually. The first is I've only found maybe 4 in total like this, but these deer are ripped to pieces. Quite literally, I mean that. Torn to shreds. Whatever killed it didn't even bother to eat it, only tear it to pieces, including its guts and all. Some of them were more disemboweled than the others, but they were generally just ripped apart. The worst one I found was a young deerling, slightly older and larger than just a little fawn. All 4 legs ripped off its body. The body was ripped in half with intestines spilling. Head and neck were both ripped off and apart. Part of the face was smashed in from the left side, and it looked to be smashed by a large rock to me. This small fawn, like the rest of the other deer I saw that died this way, are found within a small space, no more than 30 feet from each body part. It too was a bloody mess, as all of them are. Of course, my spacing estimates are just guesses, of course. Nothing is ever formulaic. This fawn had to be there for a few days, so it was decaying thoroughly. But surprisingly, there seemed to be no predators that had come and taken the free meal. The fawn didn't even appear to be eaten on, just butchered. Some of the other deer I found were in fresher states of decay, as all the kills I find are usually fresher. Probably because, out there, the bodies can decay so quickly due to climate. The same case was said for the other deer that I had found. Virtually zero signs that they were eaten on by not only what killed them, but anything other than maggots since. There is zero known predators that will kill a deer, tear it to pieces this way, and not eat on any of the meat. I see no reason, any logical reason why any predator would waste food in that way, considering it takes time and energy of the predator to take down a prey. Biologically and by nature's law, it doesn't make sense. It's something I'm still researching and looking into. What animal kills prey aggressively just for the sake of killing? Number 2. The other way that I'll find them dead is far more disturbing in my opinion, just because of how unnatural the death itself is. I found more like this than I have torn to pieces. These ones die and have random parts of their body cut open, or missing parts of their body, with no signs of blood. In fact, the first doe I found had both of her front legs and right calf and right half of her face gone. They looked to be perfectly cut out, like a fine laser or something. No drop of blood, and the body had begun to mummify under the sun. There were zero signs of decay other than that. No flies, no signs of maggots, not even an odor of death or decay actually. No signs of predators even coming to check out the cadaver. This doe was probably a week old dead, if I had to guess. It was just lying there in the middle of a small clearing, higher up in elevation. Other deer I found that were killed in this manner had very similar death patterns. Another one I found had its entire neck and head missing. Bigger doe it looked like, but the same as the first. No blood, no signs of decay, or flies or maggots. Not even predators. No smell of rot or death, and the cut once again looked surgical in nature. It was extremely clean, not a single imperfection was made. They were so clean that it looked to be man-made. At the elevation I was at, I had no answers for these happenings because I go to areas not others go to. Why would somebody be out here taking pieces of deer? It just doesn't add up to me. That also does not explain the strangeness of it all. No smell, no animal or insect touching the body. It's weird to me. Things just don't die and not give off an odor. All of this paired with the killings of both bears is kind of frightening, to say the least. Adding the deer in, and assuming there's all one big grand connection here, don't mind the conspiracy. This might be some sort of undiscovered, lone canid alpha predator. I'm no stranger to the weirdness that goes on in these mountains, along with many other mountains in the country that are notorious for UFOs, Bigfoot, and other things of that nature. I know the natives out here have many stories about these mountains, as well as a plethora of explorers and hikers alike. However, the things I've told you about are really the only encounters that I put in that category of mysterious. Everything else has just been pure survival in the wilderness. For me, to believe there is something, there needs to be a strong, suited sense of evidence for that something. That's how I've always lived by, and this situation is no exception. I cannot deny the evidence that there is something that is somewhat canid. I have no idea what it is, and others that I have talked to and spoke to don't seem to know or have an idea. Everything I know and have heard points in the direction that it is not an existent animal currently. Then we go back to the deer and the bear situation. That's very unnatural of any predator to do, whether it to be another predator or its prey. Maybe this is all a part of the weird stuff that goes on. I will continue to be vigilant, aware, and respectful of my surroundings, of the animals and places around me. This value is held true, especially when I am out in those mountains. I can't say for a fact what I've pieced together is indeed a real living creature, although it very much so is in my head. But it is definitely evidence that is based on something. What I'm not sure, I can only hope to find those answers as time goes on. This happened to me about a week ago. I live out in a big area that's primarily used for agriculture, so there's seldom houses and lots of long empty roads around here. Because of this, my nearest neighbors are about a quarter mile in both directions. Beyond that is sparsely spread out neighbors on both sides of the road, with large fields full of varying grains and plants. Between properties and areas of housing, there are large amounts of land for cattle. Think flat plains with a few trees here and there sprinkled in. Because of this, there's not a whole lot of traffic going on either way of the road. Most of the time, the entire road is dead. It makes it enjoyable for living out here. So, I have a 5-month-old son that is in this new sleep phase of his where he needs to be put in the car at night and driven to sleep. Usually, at night, I will put him in his car seat and put him in the car, get in, and go for about a 20-minute drive, turning around at a certain point and driving him back. This always seems to help him lull him into sleep and works every time I do it. Alright, so now that we've got some background info cleared, here's what happened. About a week ago, it was around 10 p.m. at night. It was clear out, decent weather. Not too cold, not too hot. I come out, put my son in the car and hop in, pull out of the driveway, and we're on the road driving. If you keep driving down a road, it just continues on straight, with a sharp 90-degree turn that heads south. This road continues only for a few houses on either side, but mostly vast empty farm fields and grasslands that haven't been used. It's pretty barren. On both sides of the road, there is the typical road ditch that you would have, and then there's a small fence. In these ditches and along these fences are very tall grass. I don't know if wheatgrass is the correct term for it, maybe just wild grass. It's the tall grass that you see out in the country. That reminds me of how wheat looks. It gets very tall along here because it's never cut. This is important, and I'll explain why here in a minute. I need to mention that because we live where we do. Animal and nightlife is very common. Deer are nocturnal by nature, so we see does by the dozen out here all the time. Blacktail, actually. Skunks are commonly seen just as much as raccoons and possums. You'll even see the occasional coyote sometimes, but that's more rare. We have cougars and mountain lions out here since they come down into the valley, but I have not personally seen one yet. Deer will sometimes pop out in front of your car at night. Same with other smaller critters. This is just something anybody that lives out here will know about and understand as common sense. I know there's wild animals at night. I just don't know what it is that I saw. I know it was not a deer, plain and simple. Okay, so I'm driving down this road, and the road begins to incline slightly. As I'm going up this long, drawn-out, slow incline, I notice the tall grass rustling on my passenger side or right side of the road, and it's caught in my brights. I immediately get ready to brake because I'm thinking it's a deer about to jump out across the road, or maybe a skunk or something, and up stands this dark shape, hyena-looking animal that seemed to stand up on two legs. It was tall, taller than a man. It scared the crap out of me. It all happened so fast within just a few seconds, but I got a look at it. It reflected a dark crimson kind of eye shine because my brights hit its eyes. It stood up out of the tall grass, facing my direction. I don't know if it looked directly at my vehicle, but I saw its face. It was very twisted and hyena-looking. I wish I could describe it better for you, but I can't. It gave off a really bad vibe that I felt the second I saw it, and it lingered. It was this horrible feeling I felt in the pit of my stomach that just screamed I shouldn't have seen what I did. When I first saw the grass rustling, I had let my foot off the gas, but not pressing the brake. As soon as I saw this, I had about 3 seconds of shock and, "What is that?" and then slammed the gas to go. The whole time, trying to rationalize what it is that I saw and what it could have been. Even though I got to see it from the front, I couldn't see any specific details like what its arms or hands looked like because they were down on its side, but it resembled a very hairy person with an ugly hyena-looking head and face. That's what I made out from the few seconds of my brights hitting it through the grass. And then, that evil feeling. Gosh, it's hard for me to type this out without getting chills just thinking about it. I've never just felt that overwhelming sense of evil before. Once you feel it, if you ever have felt it, you'll know. It's uncomfortable. The spot I usually stop to turn around at, I sat there for a minute and hesitated on what to do because I had to turn around to go back home. The exact same road. I didn't want to cross that spot again and see that thing. After sitting there for maybe 5 minutes, debating with myself, I talked myself into doing it. I was very nervous the entire drive back home, even though it's only a 10-minute drive back. As I drove back through that spot, I didn't see the animal again. I even looked in the same spot I saw it before. It was gone. The feeling too was gone, and it didn't seem to be anywhere around that I could visibly see. Anybody out there who's listening will understand where I'm coming from if they've ever had a sighting that's truly frightened them as this did to me. Whether it be something that doesn't exist or a true animal, fear is fear. There's just something far more to this than seeing something that I didn't know what it was. It invoked this awful feeling of fear and dread. I've never had that happen before. I don't think it was a natural animal either. Nothing besides bear will stand up on their hind legs like this did, and it was skinny looking. The face is what still haunts me when I rethink about this encounter. I don't want to dwell on this too much, but thought if I told you about my sighting with whatever this animal is, I could possibly get some answers. What did I see that night? Years ago, I was working as a chemicals operator at a company near the airport here around Huntsville, Alabama. I was scheduled to work a third shift, and I had extra time on my hands before going into work that night. So just before dusk, I went down to a swamp I knew had some good bass and bluegills to try out some new fishing lures I had just bought. Now, mind you, this is in the afternoon hours, and some people were still driving up and down this road, getting home from work, so traffic was pretty frequent. As I stood along the edge of the road in the swamp, casting my lure out, I hear a very large tree snap and crash in the backside of the swamp. I have never heard a tree fall in the woods naturally before, other than someone with a chainsaw cutting it. Then, 2 minutes later, another tree snapped and crashed close to the same area. Totally not a coincidence, so I'm no longer fishing at this point. Instead, I started walking down the edge of the swamp on the road to get a better look into the woods. I couldn't see anything moving or standing, at least as far as I could see anyway. Since the sun was going down behind the swamp, it was very dark in those woods. I started to hear something running towards me. I wasn't scared because I could tell it had to be small, running my way. Then, out of the thicket of the woods, came a red fox running straight at me and passed by me by about 2 feet, crossing the road, not even looking for cars or anything. It was completely scared out of its mind, like something was hunting it. I turned back towards the swamp that this fox had ran from, and I could smell it. The smell of a wet, dead goat that had been rotting in the hot summer sun for about a week. It was god-awful too. I got that eerie feeling that I should leave, so that's exactly what I did. To this day, I've never gone into those woods to investigate what made me feel that way. I know that foxes don't normally run toward people, but that fox was scared of something in those woods, and it didn't give a damn about me or heavy traffic. No, I didn't see a Bigfoot or a Dogman, but then again, I have never seen a black panther either, and I know they are real. 2 trees falling, fox running by my legs, that horrible smell and that eerie feeling. Too much to be a coincidence for me. I took my cousins out for a night stroll out this last month. Some backstory. Usually every May, a lot of my family will go out to my wife's cousin's house, which has tons and tons of woods surrounding it. It's very peaceful. Every May, a lot of us cousins will go, see each other, and have tons of food and hang out for a few days at a time. Think like a big Christmas get-together, but instead it's in May. This time, we decided at night to do some night hiking around these parts, to explore and to see what we could see. My wife's cousin has great sets of high-powered flashlights. They're the rather expensive kind, but they work great. They have multiples of them, so I decided to take a few of the little ones out with me. So it was me and my 3 little ones, aged 8 to 13. So maybe not little ones, but they're still just kids. The entire time we're walking around, we aren't seeing a whole lot of anything. Mainly just deer from time to time, and that's about it. They were terrified that a cougar was going to get us, because cougars are nocturnal hunters. But I kept them calm, letting them know that we were making too much noise to draw in a cougar and would scare it away. That's when they decided it would be the best idea to travel into even thicker woods, where the underfooting wasn't as safe due to unseen rocks and brush. At the time, I wasn't aware of that, so I said of course, being in the moment and not wanting to disappoint them. I feel like bravery got the best of all of us as we traveled into the thicker and thicker, dense parts of the forest. It was quiet, but I had noticed that there had been no crickets out at all this night. Having really nice flashlights, we were pursuing to push as far as we could. The part of the forest that we were descending down was a hill that eventually drops off to a steep canyon, which drops off again into a small river that flows around the area. During the daytime, the scenery and the sights are beauties in their own right, but during the night, it could be a death trap. As we're descending down to that point into the thickness of the forest, we hear branches breaking and the sounds of something big moving around just a little past us in the trees and brush. The time of year was not in our favor. Being springtime, everything has grown back, full and lush. You don't have a ton of visibility because of that. The kids and I halted, listening quietly. That's when the 13-year-old started panicking, thinking it was a mountain lion, but I kept trying to signal to him to be quiet and to listen. That's whenever it was stopped making noise. We stood there for a minute, thinking that whatever this supposed mountain lion was doing, that maybe it heard us and walked away. We didn't hear anything though, and had it left the area, we would have heard it trot off into the night. It was just quiet. I kept signaling to the others to slowly start to back away in case it was, and that's when we heard whatever it was start coming towards us in the trees. It sounded so much bigger than any mountain lion because each step it took was a heavy thud. That's when I started to grab the kids and swiftly retreat back up the hill we were coming down. We were all trying not to scream. It was an incredibly scary situation to be in, and I think even the more experienced and tough men of the mountain would have been terrified. I turned around to hopefully, or not hopefully, catch some sort of glimpse of whatever was moving in our direction towards us, and I see this big yellow glowing eyes higher up than I am. That's when I lost it, and just bolted it with the kids out of there. When I saw those eyes, that was enough for me. I never shined my light at them. They were just glowing up there in the trees. Luckily, the kids never saw it because they were busy running up the hill, thinking it was some big mountain lion. I know for a fact that it was for sure not a mountain lion. It was big, tall, and sounded like the weight of a great weight. Why it started aggressively approaching us, I have yet to know. I don't think it bothered to chase us up the hill or anything. When we got out of that thicker part of the forest and the land had flattened out, there was nothing behind us and no signs of anything following behind us. I didn't care. I just got us all back to the house, and that was that. They were freaked out, telling their parents that we went out there and almost got eaten by a huge mountain lion. I played along and agreed, but I know it wasn't a mountain lion. It's probably for the best the kids never know it was either. I will never tell them that and risk scarring them for life, especially about those eyes. It was a scary experience, and it's kept me out of that area at night. The first encounter was when I was young and trying to fall asleep. I looked out the window and saw it, out towards the backyard and faced my window at the time. Nowadays, I sleep in the basement. Back on topic, my brother and I always felt nervous looking out the window. My bed perfectly faced the window at the time the beast was 3 feet away, looking into the window. It had yellow eyes, the long snout of a dog, black fur. Its face was kinda human, subtract the snout and the gnarly, long teeth, and fur all over its face. Once it realized I noticed it, it snarled at me quietly through the window, and it was a stare down. I slowly pulled the covers over my head. I then proceeded to cry for what felt like forever. Then, I ran into my parents' room crying, telling me it was just a dream. I thought that for what was like 8 years until my sophomore year in high school when my brother, my friend and I were out fishing. My brother loved peanut butter at the time. He brought a plate with a giant serving-sized spoon glob and some Ritz crackers. There's a creek back there. Surprisingly some decent fish, mostly chub, but there is bullhead, carp, green-bellied sunfish, crayfish, and snapping turtles, brown trout, but that's really rare to catch there. We sometimes thought it'd be funny to throw the chub there and leave them there at our favorite spot. A giant fallen oak tree, which acts like a natural bridge across the creek it fell due to the amount of weight it was bearing, that due to a bad snowstorm. My friend and I went downstream one summer's day. Meanwhile, my brother was fishing alone. He went to go take a leak. He left the food on the other side of the creek. When he came back, he saw it running off with. He described it as more of a Bigfoot. He ran to us hysterical. We just thought he was crazy, so we started calling him Crazy Joey. After that, I thought of my run-in with something similar at the young age and the stare down. Later, my friend was busy with lawn work and prepping to move. I was secretly afraid to go out. Joe decided to come back there a month later. He left by himself. I wish I could have saw to confirm my story, but the second time around I believed him for sure. He was catching some fish, his line was all screwed up, and took it off his fishing and re-spooled it, and he ran and came because he only had one hook on the pole. He ran back and claimed that he had the same thing, chasing the bird that was wrapped up. He yelled and scared it, then ran back home for a knife as fast as he can, then cut it free. I seen something similar to my sighting. My brother, my friend, and some others were going to fish at a legal spot we didn't know it was private property at the time. Whenever me and my friends try out new spots, we have the tradition of casting bass lures first, and then using normal live bait. I wanted to hesitate because the fish were biting there pretty good at the creek. So, sure enough, they went ahead of me across the oak tree towards the quarry. I felt alone after 12 minutes. Then I took my bag, 2 poles, and the tackle I was changing out close to the log. I started walking and saw what I thought to be a big gray wolf easily waist me, being around 5'6". In Illinois, anything's possible. My friend got cornered by 4 coyotes out there once, but sure enough, the creature by another giant oak tree and I made eye contact again. Another stare down, only different since it was on all 4s. It was obviously interested in my friend, since it was following the trail that leads there. I yelled and chased it off. The look on its face was playful, because it was probably pretending not to notice me, so I chased it to the clearing. The retention ponds are on the left and a small prairie on the right. It seemingly went towards the prairie. Sure enough, I quickly forgot when one of my friends caught a big largemouth bass that weighed 3.5 pounds in the first cast. I waited until we were going to leave to inform them because I didn't want to ruin the fact we were catching bass on every cast. But the guard working there gave us a warning and told us to get out of there, and this private property, etc. I told them and they didn't believe me. The last time we saw something similar, me and my brother were scavenging for roadkill when we saw a black dog. Maybe it looked at us, ran away constantly, back it moved gracefully through the brush. Meanwhile, me and my brother were absolutely getting torn up by the raspberry bushes. We catch up, it waits, and then runs away again. We played this game 5 times with that thing, then we couldn't find it again. I live in Roscoe, enjoy being outside. I notice strange things out in the woods. People usually just kick the roadkill off the highway. It can cause an issue if it's big enough like a deer. But I noticed some things went out of its way to drag them out of the prairie. Coyotes maybe. That thing is sure, why not? There's plenty of deer, turkey, rabbits. You can even hear the coyotes get excited when they catch a poor rabbit at night. April 1999. For some background info, I was raised in the deserts, southeast of New Mexico, on 2 different ranches, so I am very well versed in the flora and fauna of our beautiful state. I even used to track semi-professionally for hunters and our local trapper. I know the critters around this state. We have always lived on very remote ranches, 50, sometimes 70 miles from the nearest actual town. My senior year of high school, I moved out of my own, being a part of the DECA program, to live closer to my job and school. Living about 12 miles from a small New Mexico town where my school and job were, seemed like living right in town after all of that. I guess my story starts in April of 1999. My boyfriend and I were rooming with a couple in a trailer house just outside of Lakewood, New Mexico. We rented a room from them and sometimes watched their 2 kids as a part of our rental agreement. For a few weeks that April, a lot of the neighboring landowners have been complaining about wild dogs coming up from the river and harassing their dogs and scaring their livestock. We were about a mile from the Pecos River, and wild dogs have indeed been a problem in the area. One guy had even reported seeing some structural damage to one of his chicken coops. The couple we lived with had 2 dogs, both of them medium-sized terrier mixes, and neither one of them were on the cowardly side. They had been getting very skittish about going outside at night, though. So much so that we had to make sure to let them out right at sunset and again at sunrise, because they would not leave the trailer house that night otherwise. On Saturday night, at about 11 p.m., I know it was a Saturday because I had neither work or school. Near the end of the month, the 4 of us were sitting around watching TV and just basically talking about stuff when the dogs, who were asleep in the master bedroom on the far east side of the house, started growling and barking at the window on the south wall of the bedroom. This was really unusual behavior for them, so we all got up to see what they were on about. By the time we got there, the dogs had shifted their barking away from the window and seemed to be barking at the wall and along the wall, like they could smell something there, but it was moving. It was very strange, and when they came up to the end of the room, their barking just went crazy. Suddenly, from farther down the wall, at the same time, about where the kitchen was, we all heard this loud thump and scuffling sound. It was powerful enough that we actually felt it, with it being an 80 by 16 trailer house and all. The dogs at this point just completely lost it. They cried out a high-pitched whine and just dove under the bed. We all ran out of the bedroom, down the hall, and into the kitchen to see what the heck was up. Peering out of the kitchen window was pointless, as it was late. There was a cloud cover, and the moon wasn't even out. We heard the scuffling noise again, and further down the house, and went into the living room to see what was up. We were all really confused at this point. The next few moments seemed to happen in slow motion. Appearing in the living room window from the left and looking right into us from the glass was, I don't know what. From the shoulders up was what I can only describe as a man dog. Its shoulders were quite human, with short, sleek hair, but the head what looked to be that of a Rottweiler. And the teeth, oh my. The teeth on this thing. All four of us screamed at about the same time, and I guess that scared it off, because it just disappeared. That image, though, is forever seared into my head. Also of note, this was a trailer house, so the bottom of that window was easily 6 foot off the ground, meaning this thing was 7 foot something. No matter how big of a dog or wolf it was, it could not have stood up and looked at us like that in the window. The guys, being guys, immediately grabbed their shotguns and headed out the door, even though I told them it was a bad idea. Super dark desert, right? Big unknown critter. No. I guess they were out there looking for it for like 20 minutes before they came back inside and said they could not see a thing. The light from the house shining on it, and it being so close to the window, were the only reasons we saw it in the first place. None of us really slept well that night. It just felt super creepy. The next morning, I got up early and decided to go have a look around, to see if there were any tracks to identify what it was. The grass and weeds that were right beside the house pretty much hid any tracks it made there. Although I did find where it looked as if something had clawed at the sliding along the bottom of the house in a couple of places, making the thump and scuffling sounds the night before. I then decided to follow the tracks the guys had made, and that was when I made a second, very unnerving discovery. The guys made clear tracks in the sandy dirt, and whatever it was out there did well, because it was pretty much circling them the entire time they were out there, at a distance of about 40 feet. The tracks were huge, canine, and switched back and forth from 4 tracks to 2, meaning it was walking bipedally for at least half the time it circled them. Just creepy. My dad and mom had taken my little brother and sister to Tucson to do something for the day. We lived in a trailer in a rural area outside of Sierra Vista. We had 2 horses, 2 dogs, a cow, and chickens on a small amount of land that we had. As the oldest son, and being 17, it was my job to feed and take care of them. On the night in question, it was a stormy monsoon rain, with thunder and lightning going on. But, like monsoons can be, they rage and then settle into a lull, and rage again. I was getting ready to settle down and watch a good movie, when all of a sudden, my 2 dogs started barking and wouldn't shut up. When I told them to calm down, in the previous week or so before that, my dogs had been acting up and barking a lot at night. I attributed this to coyotes that I had heard and howling in just the nighttime, so I got my dad's .30-30 and just 1 bullet, in case I had to shoot to scare off the coyote or killed it if rabid. I rested the loaded rifle near the wall by the back door and turned on the floodlights just outside the trailer. The rain had just now stopped, so I looked out by the window near the front door and saw 2 of our horses and cows staring, as if through the front door, to the back door of the trailer where the dogs were barking. I thought, maybe they're scared of the coyotes. So I grabbed the rifle and opened up the back door. As I was getting near the back door, I heard my dogs whimpering and crying. Now I was thinking, could it be a pack of coyotes? So I put a few bullets in my pocket, figuring I could load them if I didn't like what I saw. I opened the door and the darndest thing happened. My 2 dogs beeline rush past me to the center of the trailer and hunker down in the kitchen. Mud is everywhere on the floor from their paws, and now I'm pissed because I have to clean it up. So I close the door and go to try to get my dogs to get out, but they wouldn't budge and squirmed out of my arms when I tried to grab them. They were terrified. Now I was mad at the coyotes and grabbed the rifle to go run them off or kill them. The trailer sits on a foundation of blocks. The front and back doors are accessible by a set of small stairs. I'm 5'6", by the way. I opened the back door and was looking out in the darkness at that point. I was about to step out when I saw a set of eyes looking back at me out of the darkness. From the top of my head in the trailer to the ground is around 7+ feet or so, and here is a set of eyes looking at me, level and square on. I'm like, darn, coyote must be on the small gravel hill we used to pave the road, or it's a bird on a mesquite bush. But I was thinking to myself, that monsoon was awfully bad and rained hard. What kind of bird would hunker down on a mesquite bush? And why would a coyote be out in a downpour? So I'm raising my rifle and drawing a bead on the eyes when lightning lights up the night. All of a sudden, the lightning illuminates the small gravel hill. That's like 6 feet high, and the surrounding mesquite bushes. The light winks out as fast as it appeared. From the lightning, though, there was nothing on the gravel hill, and no bird of any on the mesquite bushes. Then it dawned on me. Whatever it was very tall and was still staring at me. A sense of dread crept over me all of a sudden, as I realized that the .30-30 only had 1 measly bullet, and if I missed, there was no way I'd be able to reload before it was on me. I kept the gun pointed at it, as I quickly closed the door. I locked the door, realizing this trailer would never withstand whatever it was out there if it attacked. I locked the front door and turned on all the lights in the house. I grabbed the bullets of the .30-06 and .22 rifle, then go into the kitchen with the dogs and I loaded each rifle full on. I hugged my dogs and prayed that whatever it was went away and did not attack. I stayed awake the whole night until my parents got back. My dad was furious that the lights were on, but my dad checked outside for coyotes, but whatever it was gone. I grew up in a town called Hawthorne, located in Nevada. Hawthorne is located right next to Walker Lake. The main highway leading from Hawthorne to Reno is Highway 95, which, if you use Google Earth or Google Maps, you can see runs right between Walker Lake and a mountain range. This creates a small area of highway that is affectionately known to the locals as the Cliffs. When I was 14, my grandparents, mom, and I were coming home late from a long day of doctor's appointments in Reno. My grandfather was driving, and we hit the Cliffs a little after 11:30 p.m. I was in the passenger seat to help keep my grandfather awake, but I still just think it was so I would sing him folk songs. Anyway, about a third of the way around the Cliffs, heading toward Hawthorne, there is a small area where the road pulls away from the mountain and creates a small alcove area. As we started to come up on it, we saw a large animal crossing the road, dragging another animal in its mouth, and it stopped in this alcove. Grandpa thought at first that I might get my first look at a live mountain lion, so he slowed down. When we got within 100 feet of it, he turned on the brights of the car. To our surprise, it was no mountain lion. We only had a couple of seconds to look at it after Grandpa turned on the brights, because right after the light hit, whatever it was, it turned to look at us 1 second, and the next, it leapt straight up the side of the mountain and out of sight, leaving the mangled body of a fox. Grandfather hit the gas and the old Buick we were in jumped, waking up the woman in the back seat. I had never seen my grandfather truly scared before, but even he was physically shaking afterward. I remember the sheer bulk of the thing, and the fact that it looked like a really large bodybuilder, when it jumped in the same fashion as a human, with its arms reaching up toward the rocks almost over its head. It had long, thick fur, but you could see the muscle definition. I don't remember the facial features, but I remember the pure terror when that thing turned and looked at the car with shining yellow eyes. I even pissed myself. I have come practically face to face with a polar bear, and I wasn't as scared as when we saw this thing. Now, I don't believe in werewolves, and I haven't seen anything like it since, but I hope I never do again. On August 27th, 2016, my 10-year-old grandson was sitting in a car at a restaurant parking lot. This occurred in San Francisco, California. He was waiting for his paternal grandmother. Across the street from him, on a sidewalk, he noticed a large creature, which I determined to be 7 to 8 foot tall, from talking with him. It was walking on 2 legs towards a wooded area at the end of a sidewalk and disappeared into some brush. The creature did not appear concerned about my grandson, as it was in no hurry. When I asked him about what he had seen, he described a classic canine-type dogman with red eyes. His distance from this creature was around 30 feet. Dali City is a semi-rural, with many pockets of woodlands and some tracts of forest here and there. The area where he saw the creature has paved roads and sidewalks, ringed with areas of trees. This occurred in 1953. The encounter I'd like to share is not my own, but that of my mother. She used to tell me stories when I was young about strange things that she had experienced in her lifetime. I remember this Dogman type of encounter. There's not particularly a lot of detail to this encounter, but what you might find interesting is the location. The sighting took place in Sacramento, California, around 1953, not too far from our state's capital. Using Google Maps to get an approximate location and lay of the land, I can see the sighting area was about 1,000 feet to the west and perpendicular to the American River. Across the river from the east bank, it's only about another 2,000 feet east to the state capital. So, this took place fairly close to a heavily populated area. My mother states when she was about 12 years old, she was lying on the couch watching TV. That's when she noticed a scary dog face looking at her through a low-pane window. The window was on either side by the door. I'm unclear of this fact. In any event, the head, she said, must have been about 2 to 2.5 feet above the ground. She covered her face in fright with her pillow. After a minute or so, she snuck a peek, figuring she just might be imagining things. She saw it and was gone, and felt a little better. Then she noticed it was now looking through another higher window. Its head was now about 4 to 4.5 feet above the ground, according to her recollection. There was nothing outside that window for a dog to stand on. At that point, she just ran to another room in terror. She doesn't really recall what happened after that. She describes the animal as being dark gray, with glowing red eyes, seemingly panting or baring its teeth. She didn't see the body, but had the impression that it was thin. Unfortunately, she doesn't recall the time of day, month, or season. My parents tell me there's likely some American Indian burial grounds in the area, as there have been excavations near the river, which yielded Native American arrowheads and other artifacts. I know it's been mentioned in some of the encounters, a proximity to rivers and Native American burial grounds. I even asked my mother if there was cornfields in the area, since that has been mentioned in the encounters before. She said only a small patch of corn stalks in their own backyard. I don't think that qualifies. The area around my grandparents' house was not really wooded. The neighborhood was mostly large fields with a few horses and some cattle. The areas around the river is wooded now, and though was probably a lot more so in 1953 than it is today. Another paranormal story about this area is that on Monster Quest's episode detailing the Mothman, someone supposedly was taking dusk or night shot pictures of the Tower Bridge in 2009 and saw a flying humanoid shape or something fly off a bridge. The tower bridge is in the 1,000-foot range from my grandparents' house. Spooky, and that's all there really is. This happened in March of 2017. It was 2:30 a.m., and another night of not being able to sleep due to back pain. I was lying on my side, reading, when my very close by neighbor's motion detector light turned on. This does happen from time to time. When it turns on, it lights up the entire side of my house. We have lived here 9 years, and I have never once seen anything walk past my bedroom window at night. Since I was facing my large bedroom window, the very bright motion detector light going off caught my attention. I looked up and saw the side silhouette of a Dogman. I exclaimed. It was walking past my bedroom window. I saw it from mid-shoulders up. The shoulders were huge and its head was huge. It had pointed ears like a German Shepherd dog and a long snout. Its mouth was slightly open, as I saw a large tongue that seemed to be lolling to the side of its mouth. When I saw this creature and spoke those words, I could swear that the thing slowed down, smirked, and then kept on going. That's all I saw that night. Last week, though, while in my bedroom again, I heard something huge land on the ground behind my bedroom wall. That wall has no windows. I heard a deep, raspy kind of breathing. I started praying, pleading the blood of Jesus over my house, grounds around it and all. I do this most nights, but sometimes I forget. I'm awake most nights until 3 a.m. or later due to having severe spinal issues as well as fibromyalgia. We live in a lovely manufactured home community. There are lots of trees around here, and it's very close to canals, large open fields, and woods. I know this is what I saw, but the fact that I saw it has left me amazed. Why is it that when so many are also seeing them? I guess I just thought since I'm in the house most of the time due to my health, I would never see them. The space between my neighbor's house and ours is about 10 feet. My husband went outside weeks later, once I got the courage to tell him that this had happened, and measured the area by the window. That Dogman had to be at least 8 feet tall. What concerns me greatly is that no one in the police department or government will alert people to their existence. People are walking around feeling a false sense of security. I know I did. I won't even try to walk outside anymore. And yes, I have cautioned my neighbors, the ones with the security light. I can't think of any other details right now, but it's important for you to know that several years ago, a homeless woman was camping out down by the river here in Albany, Oregon. She was found dead, and her tent was torn up. I believe the police report in the newspaper said she was torn up as well, but I honestly can't remember any of the details. To the best of my knowledge, no one was ever caught for that crime. This is a sleepy town, just over 50,000 people here in Lynn County. We no longer get the newspaper, so I have no idea if this happened again. I do know that a couple was down by that same area and saw a Dogman. It really frightened them badly. I heard about that on another YouTube channel, so I just want people to be aware so they don't go out at night anymore, especially near the river. But then, we're not near a river, and I saw one in the middle of the night.